They said they meant well, but so did every monster in history. There is nothing more dangerous than a man convinced of his own virtue. Virtue is not always what it seems. It is not peace, not love, not even justice. It is a tool, a symbol, a shadow on the wall mistaken for the light. We are taught from the earliest breath to aspire toward goodness, to be kind, humble, honest, but we are not taught how such traits become corrupted. We are not taught how goodness, unexamined, becomes a poison. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this. He did not hate virtue, he feared the naive worship of it. In The Prince, he writes not to condemn morality, but to expose how morality, when misunderstood, destroys those who wield it. A man who wants to act virtuously in every way necessarily comes to grief among so many who are not virtuous. This is not cynicism, it is survival. To believe in pure virtue is to walk blindfolded through a battlefield and call the bullets blessings. Machiavelli's world was not ours. It was bloodier, more brutal, yet somehow it was more honest. He watched virtuous men fall, not because they were weak, but because they were unwilling to do what needed to be done, because they mistook niceness for nobility, compassion for wisdom, goodness for truth, and when truth struck, they were unarmed. Look around. Today's world echoes with the same lies, but now we hide them better. Goodness has become performance, a brand, a mask. Politicians smile into cameras. CEOs donate to charities. Influencers talk about mindfulness while chasing metrics. We wear virtue like a costume, not a creed. We curate our goodness, filter it, edit it, monetize it. But underneath it all, underneath the acts of kindness, the words of empathy, the declarations of love for humanity, sits something else, something darker. The illusion of virtue is more seductive than evil itself, because it makes you believe you're safe, that you're incapable of harm, that your motives are pure, that you could never be the villain. But Machiavelli would ask, what makes you so certain? Have you never lied to protect someone? Never judged in silence, pretending to be above it? Never let someone suffer because speaking up would be inconvenient? Virtue is fragile when it depends on convenience, on comfort, on applause. The man who believes he is good is more dangerous than the man who knows he is not, because the latter will tread carefully, but the former believes that anything he does is justified. History is full of such men. Take Savonarola, the firebrand preacher of Florence, a man of apparent holiness. He spoke of cleansing the city, of burning sin. He led children in religious purges. Books were burned, art destroyed. He believed he was saving souls. He believed he was good. Machiavelli saw him rise and fall, saw how his moral certainty became tyranny, and how, in the end, the flames he kindled consumed him too. What began as a sermon ended in ashes. One must know how to color one's actions and be a great liar and deceiver, not because deceit is noble, but because reality is complex, because virtue cannot be simple if it is to survive contact with the real world. The illusion of virtue is this, that it alone is enough, that good intent guarantees good outcome, that if you are kind, the world will treat you kindly in return. It won't. Machiavelli knew the world does not reward purity. It rewards strategy, awareness, discipline. A man may be good, but if he is not also wise, he will become a martyr for nothing. We do not say this to abandon virtue. We say it to reclaim it from fantasy. True virtue is not passive. It is not weak. It does not apologize for existing. It is brutal when it must be. It is honest even when it hurts. And it knows when to let go of its image to protect its soul. We must stop worshiping the appearance of goodness. Virtue, real virtue, does not seek validation. It does not dress itself in soft words or careful branding. It is ugly sometimes, sharp, unyielding, because it is real. Machiavelli, the man so often misunderstood as a cynic, saw this clearly. He gave us a gift, not in encouraging cruelty, but in exposing the limits of idealism. He said, "If you wish to be truly good, you must learn how not to be, because the world you face does not care what you intend, only what you are willing to do." They only wanted justice, but their justice needed blood. And so the good became executioners with clean hands and guilty hearts. Goodness can kill, not through malice, not through greed, but through belief, through the pure, unshakable belief that one is doing the right thing. This is the danger Machiavelli saw so clearly, that virtue, untethered from pragmatism, becomes its own kind of violence. He watched history unfold like a slow crucifixion, watched good men try to govern with principle and fall, watched others cling to virtue so tightly they strangled the very people they tried to protect. Take Robespierre, a man of vision, a man who spoke of liberty, equality, fraternity. He despised tyranny. He wept for the poor. He fought for justice. And then he killed for it. The reign of terror was born not out of hatred, but out of righteousness, out of the desperate belief that society must be cleansed, that the enemies of virtue must be removed, that those who oppose justice must be silenced permanently. The guillotine became the altar, and Robespierre its priest. Machiavelli would not have been surprised. In The Prince, he warned us, the more someone clings to being good, the more dangerous they become when they are forced to confront reality. Because the truly dangerous man is not the one who knows he's capable of evil. It's the one who believes he's incapable of it. He does not see his tyranny. He calls it discipline. He does not see his vengeance. He calls it justice. He does not see the corpses in his wake. He sees a better future built on necessary sacrifices. We do not like to believe this. We prefer cleaner stories, heroes and villains, good and evil. But Machiavelli understood. No man is only one or the other, and the most terrifying monsters often wear robes of virtue. The Inquisition was not led by sadists. It was led by believers, men who thought they were saving souls. The Cultural Revolution in China was not orchestrated by criminals. It was championed by idealistic youth who believed they were rooting out corruption. They were taught to believe in purity, and so they hunted impurity everywhere, in others, in books, in blood. Good people, when threatened, do not always become weak. Sometimes they become cruel. Cruel not because they want to be, but because they see no other option. Machiavelli wrote, "A ruler must learn how not to be good, not as an endorsement of evil, but as a defense against fanaticism. Because goodness, if too rigid, becomes blind, and blindness in power becomes catastrophe." We must ask ourselves, what are we willing to do in the name of good? And more importantly, what are we willing to ignore? There is a moment in every moral crisis when the ends begin to justify the means. Just a little lie, just a small betrayal, just one exception to your principles for the greater good. This is where the rot begins, not in evil, but in compromise. A compromise you convince yourself is righteous. The modern world is full of these silent compromises. We cancel, we exile, we shame, not with knives but with words, with silence, with erasure, all in the name of accountability, all in the name of progress. But how often does justice become punishment? How often does correction become destruction? Machiavelli would ask not, "Are you right?" He would ask, "Are you wise? Are you aware of what your goodness is doing? Because if you are not conscious of your virtue, it will rule you. And when virtue rules unexamined, it feeds on others. No one sets out to become a tyrant. They become one slowly by defending the light, while walking in darkness. Robespierre started with a vision of equality. He ended with mass executions. Savonarola started with sermons. He ended with bonfires of books and bodies. They were good men by their own standards. But the world does not care about standards. It only responds to action. And history remembers the smoke. Machiavelli knew better than to trust moral purity. He wrote not for saints, but for survivors. He said, "Be good when you can. Be harsh when you must." Not because harshness is desirable, but because it is sometimes the only option left. And when you refuse that option, when you cling to kindness while the wolves circle, you do not become holy, you become prey. Or worse, you become an enabler of cruelty, wrapped in good intentions. We must examine the shadow that lives behind our goodness. Ask, why do I want to help? Whom am I truly serving? And what will I do when the people I love begin to demand things that my principles cannot accept? This is the real test of virtue, not in its existence, but in its limits. And Machiavelli would argue, a man who does not know the limits of his virtue will one day become a prisoner to it, or a tyrant in its name. Let us leave this question suspended in the air. What would you do to protect what you believe is good, if it meant becoming everything you hate? Because the answer to that is where your real morality begins. We praise those who feel deeply, but what happens when feelings are used to bind, to shame, to control? Empathy too can be a cage, gilded, soft, and suffocating. Empathy is beautiful, but it is not innocent. We are taught that empathy is a virtue, the highest of them, to feel what others feel, to suffer with them, to love through pain. But what if that feeling could be used against you? What if it could be turned into a weapon? Niccolò Machiavelli did not speak directly of empathy, but he spoke of its cousins: compassion, mercy, pity. He observed how quickly these feelings, when placed in the wrong hands, became liabilities. How rulers who could not stomach the suffering of a few condemned the suffering of many. It is much safer to be feared than loved, he wrote, when one of the two must be lacking, because love without limits can be manipulated, and empathy can become a leash. Consider this: empathy makes us vulnerable, not just to pain, but to influence. If I can make you feel my suffering, I can shape your actions. I can demand. I can guilt. I can pull you toward me, not through reason but emotion. The more empathetic you are, the easier you are to control, not by violence, but by sadness, by stories, by the unspoken expectation. If you care, you must act. Machiavelli saw the dangers of such softness in governance. A prince who pities everyone becomes overwhelmed. He cannot make the hard decisions. He hesitates. He delays. He avoids conflict at all costs. And in doing so, he invites chaos. To be too empathetic is to let the cries of a few blind you to the needs of the many. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. Empathy, when unchecked, becomes sentimentalism, a theater of concern, a public show of shared pain, not for healing, but for power. We see this today everywhere. Corporations tweet condolences while exploiting workers. Influencers cry on camera, monetizing trauma. Politicians kneel in silence while passing laws that strangle lives. It is not always insincere, but it is often strategic. Empathy has become a currency. Whoever suffers most wins the stage. But what happens when you refuse to play along? When you say, "I will not cry with you. I will not kneel. I will act, but I will not perform." They call you cold, detached, inhuman, because in an age where feelings have become power, to deny emotional submission is to commit social heresy. Machiavelli would warn us, Beware the tyrant who rules with empathy. He will not seem cruel. He will not raise his voice, but he will wrap chains in velvet and convince you they are gifts. He will offer you comfort as long as you obey. And if you resist, you will be labeled heartless, a danger to the cause, a traitor to the tribe. Real empathy does not demand submission. It does not guilt or threaten or manipulate, but weaponized empathy does. It says, if you were good, you would help. If you cared, you would agree. If you disagree, you must be evil. This is no longer compassion. It is coercion, a quiet form of tyranny, one that smiles, one that hugs you while slowly cutting away your autonomy. Let us speak plainly. Empathy is powerful, but power is always dangerous, especially when it is invisible. You can resist a sword, you can deflect a fist, but how do you resist a plea? A tear? A trembling voice asking, "Don't you care?" Machiavelli would say, you must learn to, not because you are inhuman, but because in truth you are not. You care, and that is the danger. The modern mind is addicted to feeling. We judge morality not by action, but by effect. We don't ask, was it right? We ask, did it feel right? Did the speaker sound sincere? Did they seem kind? But seeming is not being, and sincerity is not competence. Machiavelli reminds us, a leader who cannot separate his heart from his hand will spill more blood than a tyrant who kills with purpose. So what do? Do we abandon empathy? Do we close ourselves to the pain of others? No, we discipline it. We allow ourselves to feel but not be ruled by feeling. We let empathy inform our actions but not dictate them. We say, I see your pain, I understand it, but I must choose the path that serves the most, not the loudest. This is not apathy, it is strength. In The Prince, Machiavelli praised Cesare Borgia, a man of ruthless clarity, not because Borgia was good, but because he knew when goodness was a trap. He did not let mercy weaken justice. He did not let pity dilute policy. He acted with awareness of consequence, not the need to be liked. This, Machiavelli believed, was real leadership, not heartless, but strategic. The weaponization of empathy is a quiet war. It does not march or shout. It whispers, pleads, smiles even as it binds. And if we are not vigilant, we become its soldiers, convinced we are healing the world, while slowly losing the ability to think, to choose, to lead. So ask yourself, when you feel for someone, are you moved by truth or by pressure? When you act in kindness, is it choice or fear of judgment? And when you are called to suffer with another, who benefits? Empathy is not the enemy, but blind empathy is. Machiavelli knew, the heart is a compass, but a compass alone is useless if you don't also read the map. Some wear white, not to illuminate, but to hide, untouched by darkness because they never dared to enter it. Moral purity is seductive, tells us, do not bend, do not compromise, stand apart and be better, promises a clean conscience, a sense of superiority, a place above the fray. But Machiavelli, ever the realist, saw through this illusion. He knew that purity, when idolized, becomes paralysis, that the pure, unwilling to taint their image, often choose inaction over impact. And in the face of injustice, inaction is not neutrality. It is cowardice. In The Prince, he warns us, a man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good. To remain good at all times is to refuse the burden of reality. To avoid dirt is to avoid duty. And in avoiding duty, the pure abandon the very world they claim to protect. Consider the bystander. He sees violence but does not intervene. He tells himself, I am not violent. I am peaceful. I will not stoop to their level. And yet, Someone bleeds, someone cries out, and he stands still, because to act would require compromise, would require stepping into the mess. So he remains unstained, but so does his conscience, unproven. The world is not moved by clean hands. It is moved by willing ones, hands that will build, that will break, that will carry, even when it means sacrifice, even when it means failure, even when it means becoming the very thing you once judged. Machiavelli respected this courage, the courage to abandon the illusion of righteousness in order to serve something real. There is a quiet arrogance in purity. It refuses to engage with complexity. It demands the world be simple, good or bad, black or white. And when reality refuses, the pure retreat. They become critics, observers, oracles of virtue who speak often and act rarely. They measure others by impossible standards while holding themselves above the fray. But the truth Machiavelli knew is this: if you never take a risk, your virtue is untested. And untested virtue is no virtue at all. Think of the philosopher kings who never ruled, the prophets who never acted, the moralists who write in ink, not blood. They leave no legacy but words, no cities, no peace, no change, because purity fears imperfection, and all action is imperfect. In today's world, this disease of purity takes many forms. Online, we see it as performative outrage, as sanctimony without sacrifice, as digital tribunals where the wrong are cast out, not to correct but to purify the tribe. No dialogue, no forgiveness, only exile. This is not strength. It is fear dressed in principle. Machiavelli would have called it moral cowardice. He believed, to lead, you must be willing to stain your soul, not for ego, not for gain, but for the people. A prince must lie if truth would destroy peace. He must kill if mercy would invite rebellion. He must choose the lesser evil, not hide from all evil, because hiding from evil allows it to spread. We must understand this. Moral purity can become a shield, not to protect others, but to protect yourself from discomfort. It is easier to remain clean when others do the dirty work, when others sacrifice, when others compromise, and so the pure live peacefully, while the rest bleed quietly. This was the tragedy of Florence, Machiavelli's homeland. Too many good men, too afraid to act. They believed in ideals, but they feared reality. They hesitated while the Medici moved. They argued while enemies plotted. And in their inaction, they lost everything. Machiavelli, cast into exile, wrote The Prince not to praise brutality, but to teach survival. He understood that power does not reward the pure. It rewards the bold. So ask yourself, have you refused to act because you feared being misunderstood? Have you rejected leadership because you feared judgment? Have you chosen silence because speaking might dirty your name? That is not virtue. That is vanity. Real morality does not fear the shadows. It walks into them, knowing it may not leave unscarred. It does not ask, how can I stay clean? It asks, what must be done? Even if it means betrayal, even if it means guilt, even if it means looking in the mirror and not liking what you see. The pure avoid this mirror. They prefer the fantasy of goodness, uncompromised, untouchable, eternal. But the world does not bend to fantasy. It breaks it, and when it breaks, those who clung to purity are left, shattered and irrelevant. The price of never being wrong is never being brave. And Machiavelli believed bravery mattered more than blamelessness, because only the brave build nations. Only the brave face betrayal. Only the brave can look evil in the eye and still choose action. Let this be a quiet warning. If your morality exists only in theory, if it cannot survive contact with imperfection, then it is not morality. It is decoration, and the world has no need for decoration. In moments of crisis, no one is truly themselves, only who they need to be. In a world that rewards illusion, authenticity is a risk few can afford. What does it mean to be good? Not in essence, but in the eyes of others? Because in the theater of society, goodness is rarely measured by deeds. It is measured by presentation. We trust smiles. We believe gentle words. We equate politeness with morality. And so begins the deception. Machiavelli knew this well. In The Prince, he wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. A leader," he said, "must appear merciful, faithful, humane, sincere, religious, but be prepared to act otherwise when needed." This was not cynicism. It was survival, because the world does not reward honesty. It rewards appearance. And so even the good wear masks, not to deceive maliciously, but to survive, to belong, to be loved. They learn which emotions to show, which words to repeat, which causes to support, not from inner conviction, but from outer necessity. This is not always conscious. Often it is automatic, a slow erosion of the true self, beneath layers of social camouflage. We do not lie because we are evil. We lie because the truth is heavy, because sincerity is dangerous, because transparency invites scrutiny. So we perform. We wear the mask of the nice guy, the humble leader, the kind woman, the good citizen, and in time, we begin to believe it ourselves. Machiavelli did not condemn this. He understood it. To govern, to influence, to survive, you must craft perception. Not every battlefield is made of blood. Some are made of eyes. The eyes of the crowd, the court, the boardroom, the screen, and in their gaze, we mold ourselves. But here is the danger. When the mask becomes the identity, when we forget the difference between who we are and who we must appear to be, we lose something vital. We lose freedom, because the longer we wear a mask, the harder it becomes to take off. The good person becomes a brand, one you must defend at all costs, so you avoid controversy. You filter your words. You curate your life into virtue, but in doing so, you become a prisoner of your own image, afraid to speak, afraid to act, afraid to be seen as anything less than perfect. Machiavelli would call this a subtle tyranny, not imposed from outside, but self-inflicted, the tyranny of one's own reputation. He warned leaders, do not seek to be loved above all. It is a dangerous addiction, because love is fragile, and the crowd is fickle. They will love you today and crucify you tomorrow. Think of history. Think of those who wore the mask of virtue while hiding darker ambitions. Savonarola, the Florentine preacher, claimed to purge sin from the city. He burned books. He toppled art. He declared moral purity. And then he burned on the same pyre he built for others. Because even the mask of righteousness cannot protect you from the mob. Once the wind changes. In the modern age, the mask has become even more intricate. Social media rewards performance. Virtue is algorithmic. We are not moral. We are visible. A good tweet, a trending cause, a filtered life of curated compassion. We are seen, but never truly known. Machiavelli would laugh or weep, because this illusion is more dangerous than lies. It is the self-lie, the belief that the person we present is who we truly are. But if our morality exists only in what others see, then it is not morality. It is marketing. There is no greater tragedy than a person who becomes their mask. They begin to censor even their thoughts, to avoid the shame of contradiction, to avoid the risk of disapproval. And in time, they lose their ability to confront the truth about themselves, about the world, about what needs to be done. So what can we learn? Should we discard all masks? Should we bare our flaws to everyone? No, but we must remember the difference between performance and character. Machiavelli taught, a ruler must know how to deceive, but also when to stop. He must not believe his own illusion, because to rule others, you must first rule yourself. Do you control your image, or does it control you? Do you perform goodness, or do you practice it when no one is watching? Do you wear a mask, or has the mask become your face? The path to power, to peace, to truth, is not in denying the mask. It is in knowing when to take it off, and who you are when you do. Machiavelli's insight was not to destroy illusion, but to master it, to walk the line between image and action, without becoming consumed by either. In a world built on mirrors, we must find our reflection, not in the glass, but in our choices. The softest hands can cause the deepest wounds, not out of hatred, not out of malice, but out of love that refuses to see its own shadow. We're taught that kindness saves, that gentleness heals, that if we meet cruelty with compassion, the world will soften in response. But Machiavelli knew better. He saw how unchecked mercy can rot a kingdom, how noble intentions can become weapons, how good people, in their refusal to do harm, become architects of greater destruction. In The Prince, he writes, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, when one of the two must be lacking." He does not say fear is superior in all cases, but when the stakes rise, when chaos knocks, he warns us, kindness alone is not enough, because kindness, when applied without wisdom, without severity, can be as deadly as cruelty itself. Take the example of Cesare Borgia. Machiavelli admired him not for being good, but for being effective. Cesare knew when to act decisively, when to kill, when to terrify. When he conquered Romagna, he ordered the brutal Ramiro de Orco to restore order. De Orco ruled with terror, swift and bloody. Once order was restored, Cesare had him executed publicly, to signal that cruelty, when necessary, would not be tolerated. This, Machiavelli believed, was how a leader uses cruelty well. Cruelty with purpose, cruelty with timing, cruelty that prevents future suffering. Now contrast this with the kind ruler who cannot bear to punish, who hesitates, who forgives too often, who fears being seen as harsh. They believe they are being merciful, but mercy to the wicked is cruelty to the innocent. Imagine a city overrun by thieves. A ruler, noble and kind, says, "I will not punish them harshly. I believe in second chances." The thieves rejoice. They steal again. The weak suffer. And in the name of compassion, the ruler has betrayed his duty. The people cry not for mercy, but for justice, for protection, for someone to wield the knife on behalf of those who cannot. There is a kind of goodness that is selfish, not because it intends harm, but because it refuses to see harm. It seeks to feel righteous, not to do what is right. It clings to innocence, while the world burns. This is not virtue, it is negligence. Machiavelli understood this dark truth. Sometimes, to prevent suffering, you must cause it, not indiscriminately, not joyfully, but with cold, calculated precision. Because evil does not stop for kindness, it stops for force. We see this today in softer forms. Parents who refuse to discipline for fear of being mean. They raise children who know no boundaries. Leaders who refuse to enforce law for fear of seeming oppressive. They breed corruption. Activists who preach love but offer no solution to real violence. They become poets, while real victims bleed. Compassion is beautiful, but without structure, collapses into chaos. Machiavelli would say, "Be feared when necessary, be cruel when mercy fails. Do not mistake softness for strength." And yet many do, because good people often fear conflict. They fear blood on their hands, even if it saves lives. So they delay decisions. They pray that things fix themselves. They hope the wicked will see reason. But in the delay, more damage is done. Moral paralysis masquerading as principle. There's a haunting irony here. The truly dangerous are not always the monstrous. Sometimes they are the gentle ones, the ones who refuse to see the ugliness in others, the ones who choose ideals over action, the ones who say, "I meant well," as the house collapses. Goodness without force is fragile. Goodness without limits is foolish. Goodness without consequence is cruelty. Because when you let harm go unpunished, when you tolerate the intolerable, when you fear being the villain, you become the enabler, and that too is a form of violence. Machiavelli teaches us, if you would truly protect, you must be willing to wound. The shepherd must kill the wolf, not just speak kindly to the flock. Mercy is not the avoidance of pain. It is the choosing of pain, when pain is the price of peace. To lead, to parent, to love, is to make impossible choices, to weigh pain against pain, to choose not between good and evil, but between lesser evils. The good person who cannot do this, who recoils at the thought of causing suffering, ultimately causes more, through inaction, through denial, through fear. This is the paradox Machiavelli presents, that cruelty in rare moments may be the highest form of compassion, that to love your people, you must sometimes be hated by them, that to preserve what is good, you must be willing to do what is not. Let that sink in. Not all who wound are wicked, and not all who embrace peace are just. Goodness is not in what you avoid, but in what you endure, for the sake of others. To be loved is to be held hostage, by praise, by fear, by the ever-shifting winds of approval. What is more dangerous than a good man, desperate to be adored? We all want to be loved, but not all love is equal. Not all admiration is honest. Not all praise purifies. Sometimes the need to be loved is not a longing for connection, but a mask for weakness. And Machiavelli recognized this. In The Prince, he asked a now famous question: is it better to be loved or feared? It is much safer to be feared. Why? Because love is conditional. Because love depends on what others feel, not what you do. Because the crowd, the public, the court, loves with convenience. Today they love your mercy. Tomorrow they will curse your restraint. A good person who needs to be loved is vulnerable. They are torn between what is right and what is received well, between acting with integrity and avoiding disapproval, between the hard decision and the applause of the mob. Machiavelli saw it in leaders. He saw rulers fall not from cruelty, but from kindness that demanded recognition. The need to be seen as virtuous outweighed the need to be effective. So they made decisions that pleased the people, but weakened the state. They were generous when they should have been strategic. They were forgiving when they should have punished. They loved too much and were loved too briefly. Let us look at history. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, was beloved in life and revered in death. But his son, Commodus, inherited the empire and tore it apart. Why? Because Marcus, despite his wisdom, failed to secure a worthy successor. Why did he not adopt a stronger heir? Why did he not correct his son's decay? Historians suspect love, a father's love, blinding, sincere, tragic. Even the wisest man in Rome was not immune to affection's shadow. Machiavelli would nod. Love clouds the eyes. Not only romantic love, but the love of followers, of subjects, of friends. A ruler who seeks only love becomes a servant to their image. They stop leading, they start pleasing, and in doing so, they lose respect. Love in its purest form is sacred, but when demanded, it becomes a bribe, a way to control the good person through praise and disapproval. Give enough applause, and they'll abandon their strength. Threaten their likability, and they'll fold. They will betray their own values to preserve affection. You see it today. Leaders who refuse to take unpopular stances. Thinkers who fear the backlash of truth. Friends who agree to everything just to avoid friction. The good person, if not watchful, becomes a mirror, reflecting what others want to see, not a soul, standing on its own feet. Machiavelli warned, "You must not be cruel without reason, but if you must choose between being feared and loved, choose fear, because fear lasts longer than favor." Fear does not waver with emotion. Fear, when used wisely, commands respect. Now, fear does not mean terror. It means authority. It means setting boundaries. It means acting decisively. It means doing what must be done, even when it costs you admiration. This is the paradox. To be truly loved in the end, you must be willing to be unloved in the moment, because real respect, real loyalty, is born not from flattery, but from consistency and strength. So ask yourself, are you a prisoner of praise? Do you avoid truth to keep your image clean? Do you hesitate because the people watching might disapprove? Do you confuse being agreeable with being just? Goodness is not a performance. It is not a charm. It is not a smiling mask. It is the courage to do what others will not, even if they hate you for it. When the applause fades, when the audience turns, who will you be? Will you act the same, without the crowd? Will your morality stand, without validation? Because a goodness that depends on love is no goodness at all. It is a hostage situation. This is the lesson: to lead with strength, to love without needing it returned, to act justly, even when the reward is silence. Machiavelli does not tell us to become monsters. He tells us, do not let your longing for love turn you into a coward. To be feared in the right way is not to be cruel. It is to be clear, firm, principled. It is to have a spine when others offer only smiles. And in time, that strength will be loved more truly than any mask you could wear, because people tire of flatterers, but they remember those who did what was right when it was not easy. The road to hell was never paved with malice. It was built by saints, carried forward by the pure in heart, fueled by certainty that they were right. This is the most terrifying form of evil, the evil committed in the name of goodness. It wears no monstrous face, no villain's cloak, speaks gently, smiles. It believes it is saving the world, and that is what makes it so dangerous. Machiavelli was no stranger to this idea, though often misunderstood as a cold realist. He was, in fact, a clear-eyed observer of human illusion. He knew that the most destructive leaders were not always wicked men, but righteous ones, the ones who believed they had a divine mandate, a moral calling, a sacred mission. A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good. The prince, this sentence, deceptively simple, unveils a terrible truth. If you cling too tightly to goodness, refuse to adapt, refuse to bend, you will either perish or become the very thing you hate. History bears witness. The Inquisition, priests burning heretics to save their souls, the Crusades, knights slaughtering thousands. In the name of mercy, revolutionaries, beheading monarchs, then ruling with equal tyranny. Each believed they were on the side of justice. Each believed they were purging evil. Each believed they were the heroes. And yet, Machiavelli would ask, what were the results? Not intentions, not ideology. Results. Did they create order? Did they preserve the state? Did they prevent greater harm? Because if not, then their goodness was not good at all. It was ego, dressed in virtue. Machiavelli respected stability, order, function. To him, a moral act was one that preserved these, not one that felt holy. He saw that those who act for glory, for righteousness, for a vision of paradise, are often the first to excuse cruelty. Because when you believe you are right, you stop asking questions. You stop doubting yourself. You stop seeing others as human. And when doubt dies, so does mercy. This is the moral blindness of good people. They believe their ends are pure, so any means becomes justified. Lying becomes persuasion. Oppression becomes protection. Violence becomes righteous fury. And all the while, they sleep peacefully, because they are not the villains. They are the chosen, the enlightened, the moral elite. We see this now in every ideological movement that claims to stand for justice, yet demands silence, punishment, submission. They say they are building a better world, but they do so by shaming, exiling, destroying. They do not question themselves. They question only you. And the more convinced they are of their purity, the more damage they do. Machiavelli would call this delusion. To be good is not to be blind. To be good is not to be certain. It is to struggle, to weigh, to sacrifice. It is to look at your own hands and ask, what am I really doing here? Not what you want to believe, what is true. He believed a leader must be willing to see clearly, even when clarity hurts, because goodness that cannot confront reality is not goodness, it is fantasy, and fantasies, when given power, become nightmares. You may know someone like this, person who cannot see how their virtue has become violence, who preaches love, but speaks with venom, who says they fight for justice, but seeks only domination. They are convinced they are right, and that certainty makes them unreachable. So Machiavelli offers us a harsh cure. Abandon your need to feel good. Abandon your certainty. Abandon your image of goodness. Instead, embrace responsibility. Ask what your actions produce. Ask what pain they cause. Ask whether your values are serving others or serving you. This is not coldness. This is maturity. The mature moral person does not seek to be right. They seek to be useful. They know that even good intentions can rot into tyranny, so they stay vigilant. They question themselves. They hold their values. Like a flame, bright but dangerous, they are willing to be wrong, to be humbled, to be revised, because they are not in love with their own righteousness. That is real goodness, not loud, not self-congratulatory, not always smiling, but honest, measured, willing to see the whole truth, even the parts that hurt. So where does that leave us? What do we do with this shadow side of virtue, with the fact that even the best among us can become dangerous, that even compassion, even justice, even love can become instruments of harm? It leaves us with a mirror and a question. Are you good or just afraid of being bad? Do you seek truth or validation? Would you still do what's right if no one ever praised you for it? Machiavelli doesn't give us answers. He gives us clarity. He strips away our illusions, not to turn us into villains, but to help us become strong, honest, whole, to teach us that goodness is not the absence of evil, but the mastery of it. You are not defined by your intentions. You are defined by what you do. when your values are tested, when the cost of doing good is high, when the outcome is unclear, when the world does not clap, then and only then do you discover who you really are. This is the final lesson. Goodness is not light. It is shadow and fire, blood and doubt, sacrifice and silence. To be truly good is to walk into darkness with eyes open and heart steady. In the end, what is goodness if no one sees it? What is morality without a witness? What is virtue when no light shines upon it? We speak of good people as if they are born, not made, as if morality is inherited, not earned, as if being good is a position rather than a practice. But the truth is darker, more fragile, more sacred. Goodness is not a glow. It is not the smile of saints or the calm of pacifists. It is a discipline, quiet war within yourself every hour. It is not the absence of power. It is the refusal to let power rot the soul. It is not pleasing others. It is protecting them, sometimes from themselves. It is not being right. It is being responsible. And this responsibility is heavier than glory. Machiavelli showed us the truth behind the curtain. He stripped away the beautiful lies we tell ourselves. He dared to say, virtue that cannot survive reality is not virtue at all. To be truly good in this world requires more than kindness. It requires clarity, courage, a willingness to suffer without applause, and sometimes to act without thanks. The dark side of good people is not that they are secretly evil. It is that they are unprepared for how difficult good truly is, how lonely, how complex, how quiet. Anyone can perform goodness when the stage is lit. But what do you do when the lights go out? What do you do when goodness demands sacrifice and offers nothing in return? Would you still choose it? This is the final mirror, not Machiavelli's, yours. You will not always be celebrated. You will not always be understood. You will not always be believed. But if you remain awake, if you hold your principles like a blade, not a badge, then you may walk through fire and not lose your soul. Be wary of applause. Be suspicious of certainty. Be careful with your own heart, because even goodness, if left unchecked, can cast a shadow. Machiavelli did not call us to abandon morality. He called us to reforge it, to move beyond illusion, to wield ethics like a soldier's sword, disciplined, sharp, prepared. He knew it is not the wolves that are most dangerous. It is the shepherds who refuse to see the blood on their hands. So, do not aim to be good, as the world defines it. Aim to be anchored, and when the time comes, when the world demands your mask, your silence, your surrender, stand still, even if you are the only one left. Because in the end, real goodness is not what we do when we are safe. It is what we become when we are alone, when no one is watching, when the cost is high, and we choose it anyway.